There is a specific kind of silence that follows the reading of certain texts, not the silence of contemplation or satisfaction or even sadness. This is the silence of profound disorientation. The silence that comes when your rational mind cannot reconcile what you have just experienced with the cultural assumptions you hold about art, about storytelling, about what is allowed to exist. Neonomicon produces that silence. It sits in your hands like a paradox given physical form. On one side, it is authored by Alan Moore, the towering genius who gave us Watchman V for Vendetta, From Hell. A man whose command of narrative structure, literary symbolism, and the very mechanics of the comic book medium is virtually unmatched. This is not some amateur provocateur desperate for attention. This is a master craftsman at the absolute height of his powers. And yet, Neonomicon is also one of the most viscerally repellent, graphically brutal, and morally nauseating works of fiction published in the 21st century. It won the Bram Stoker Award for Best Graphic Novel in 2011, and simultaneously became a text that thousands of readers, even devoted Moore fans, simply could not finish. Critics have called it unwatchable, indefensible, and a masterpiece of unreadable horror. The cognitive dissonance is overwhelming. The premise is deceptively simple. Two FBI agents, Breers and Lamper, are assigned to investigate a series of occult murders linked to a Lovecraftian cult. What begins as a procedural horror story rapidly descends into something far more disturbing. As they dig deeper into the cult's rituals, into a mysterious arcane language called Aklo, the agents find themselves not just investigating a mystery, but being systematically dismantled. Their bodies, their language, their sense of self, all of it is methodically torn apart in scenes of cold, almost clinical brutality. But here is the question that haunts every page of this work. Why? We live in an age of transgression, gore, violence, sexual content. These are commonplace in our media diet. We've seen it all. But Neonomicon doesn't feel like typical transgression. It isn't thrilling. It isn't cathartic. It isn't even darkly entertaining. It is cold, methodical, joyless. The horror is presented with the emotional temperature of a medical procedure. Is this just an aging iconoclast desperately reaching for shock value? A brilliant mind descending into nihilistic provocation? Or is something else happening here? Something far more calculated and far more profound? What if Moore is using the ultimate taboo, the weaponization of sexual violence as narrative device, not to titillate or offend, but to force a revelation so psychologically profound that it can only be delivered as trauma? What if Neonomicon is arguing that certain truths about the universe, about our own nature, cannot be understood in any rational sense? They can only be experienced as a violation of everything we are. What if the horror isn't the content itself, but what it's trying to tell us about the shape of reality lurking just beneath the skin of our sanitized world? To understand what Alan Moore is doing in Neonomicon, we must first travel back to Providence, Rhode Island, to a small, isolated man typing away in a cold apartment in the 1920s and 30s. His name was Howard Phillips Lovecraft, and he was building a new architecture of terror. Lovecraft's central philosophical insight, what scholars call cosmicism, was revolutionary in its bleakness. He argued that humanity was not the center of creation, not even a significant footnote. We are an accident, a temporary arrangement of matter on an insignificant rock, orbiting an unremarkable star, in a universe that is not only indifferent to our existence, but fundamentally incomprehensible to our minds. The universe operates according to geometries, dimensions, and entities so alien that even perceiving them would shatter human sanity like glass. This is the horror of the void, the horror of insignificance, the horror of knowledge itself. But Lovecraft's true genius, his lasting cultural impact, lies not in what he described, but in what he refused to describe. Read any Lovecraft story, And you'll notice a pattern. His narrators encounter things they call indescribable, unnameable, blasphemous beyond all conception. His monsters are always lurking just beyond the edge of clear description. Cthulhu is vaguely octopoid, vaguely draconic, vaguely humanoid, but ultimately unknowable. The horror is always atmospheric, suggestive, operating in the gaps of language itself. And this is where things get interesting, because Lovecraft's unspeakable horror was not just a literary technique. It was a psychological defense mechanism. H.P. Lovecraft was a man consumed by terror, not just of cosmic entities, but of the world around him. He was a profound xenophobe, a documented racist, and a man who seemed genuinely horrified by human sexuality. His letters reveal a mind trapped in a perpetual state of disgust at immigrants, at mixed-race relationships, at the changing social fabric of early 20th century America. He feared the other with an intensity that bordered on pathological, and those fears are everywhere in his fiction. The Shadow over Innsmouth, perhaps his most famous work, is a thinly veiled allegory about race mixing. The Deep Ones are not just fish people, they are the horror of miscegenation made literal. The protagonist discovers to his existential horror that he carries their blood. His genetic legacy is contaminated. The horror is biological, sexual, and utterly racialized. Lovecraft was terrified of sex, terrified of the body, terrified of anything that threatened the purity of his hermetically sealed rational worldview. And so his cosmic horror became a coded language, a way to express these deeply taboo anxieties without naming them directly. His monsters are not just alien, they are sexual, they are reproductive, they infiltrate bloodlines, they create hybrid offspring, they transform human bodies into something other. And this is where Alan Moore enters the conversation. Moore is not just a fan of Lovecraft, he is a scholar of the form. And Neonomicon represents his most brutal act of literary criticism. He takes Lovecraft's subtext, all those carefully hidden anxieties about sex, race, and the dissolution of the self, and he drags them into the light. He makes the implicit explicit. He writes the story Lovecraft was too terrified to write himself. Moore's thesis is both simple and devastating. What if Lovecraft's fear wasn't just bigotry? What if, on some instinctive level, he understood something true? What if the things he was trying to describe, these incomprehensible cosmic entities, are fundamentally tied to the forces he was most terrified of: sexuality, genetic legacy, the biological imperative? What if the revelation at the heart of cosmic horror cannot be separated from the body, from reproduction, from the primal drives that govern all life? Neonomicon is Moore's answer to that question. It is Lovecraft's nightmare made manifest, the story he buried beneath layers of purple prose and indescribable imagery. Moore tears it open and forces us to look directly at it. And what we see is not a metaphor, it is a method. So let's talk about why Neonomicon is the way it is. Why Moore chose this method. Why the violence? Why the sex? Why the relentless, joyless brutality? Because this is not accident. This is not shock for shock's sake. This is a carefully constructed philosophical argument delivered through the language of trauma. To understand it, we need to turn to a French philosopher named Georges Bataille, who spent his life thinking about the place where the sacred and the obscene collapse into one another. Bataille argued that eroticism is not simply sex. It is something far more profound and far more dangerous. Eroticism, for Bataille, is the human experience of transgression, the moment when we violate boundaries, when we break taboos, when we confront the forbidden. And the most fundamental taboo, the one that underlies all others, is death. Sex and death, Bataille argued, are twins. They are the two great discontinuities in human experience. Sex, true eroticism, is the momentary dissolution of the self, the breakdown of the boundaries between I and other. It is a tiny rehearsal for death, and this is why it is sacred. This is why every human culture surrounds it with ritual, with prohibition, with language designed to contain it. Because when those boundaries dissolve, we are confronted with something terrifying, the realization that the self is fragile, that it can be invaded, that it can be unmade. Now apply this to Neonomicon. The comic is obsessed, structurally obsessed, with language. The central mystery revolves around Aklo, a fictional occult language that appears throughout Lovecraft's work. In Moore's story, Aklo is not just words on a page. It is a functional language, a linguistic system that rewires the brain of anyone who speaks it. It is a code that does not describe reality. It alters it. As the FBI agents descend deeper into the world of the cult, their own language begins to fail them. Their rational, procedural cop speak, the language of reports, evidence, and logical deduction, starts to fracture. They begin speaking in fragments. Their internal monologues become unreliable. The very tool they use to make sense of the world, language, is being systematically stripped away. And into that void, something else enters. Moore's argument, the one that makes the comic so unbearable, is this: a cosmic truth, a true Lovecraftian revelation, cannot be transmitted through human language. Language is a human system. It is designed to encode human experience, human scale, human concepts of time, space, and causality. An entity like Cthulhu, which exists outside those parameters, cannot be explained. It cannot be understood. It can only be experienced. And the only language older than words, the only communication system that predates rational thought, is the biological imperative, the language of the body, the language of reproduction, of genetic transmission, of primal, pre-rational drive. This is why the horror in Neonomicon is sexual. Moore is arguing that the revelation, the true encounter with the other, is not intellectual, it is biological. It is not something you learn. It is something done to you. The cosmic truth is not a fact to be comprehended. It is an invasion, a violation, a rewriting of your genetic code. The agents in Neonomicon are not killed by the cult. That would be too simple. They are transformed. Their bodies become sites of alien reproduction. Their identities are dissolved not through violence, but through a grotesque parody of intimacy. This is Moore weaponizing Freud's concept of the uncanny, the unhomely. The uncanny is not the strange or the foreign. It is the familiar made horrifying. It takes the things we consider most safe, home, family, sex, and reveals them as sites of potential terror. Neonomicon makes the human body uncanny. It makes language uncanny. It makes intimacy uncanny. And this is the eroticism of the unspeakable. We are drawn to the taboo. We are magnetically, compulsively attracted to the forbidden. Every human culture has its list of things that must not be said, must not be shown, must not be thought, and we cannot stop thinking about them. Moore's comic traps the reader in this paradox. You want to look away. Every instinct screams at you to close the book, but you don't. You keep reading, because somewhere, in the darkest corner of your psyche, you need to know what happens next. You are complicit in your own violation. And this is Moore's point. A true encounter with the other, whether it's Cthulhu or God or the raw, indifferent machinery of the cosmos, would not be a grand cinematic spectacle. It would not be a moment of enlightenment. It would be an assault, a genetic, psychological, and linguistic invasion. It would be the total and irreversible loss of everything you think of as yourself. And the most terrifying part, a part of you wants it. Let's fast forward to right now, to the world we actually live in. The world Neonomicon predicted with eerie, almost prophetic accuracy. Picture this. You're in a bookstore or scrolling through an online shop. You see a plush toy. It's green, squid-like, with tiny wings and a cartoonish face. It's adorable. It's a cute Cthulhu. Next to it, a Funko Pop figure. The great old one himself, reduced to a bobblehead with dead plastic eyes. Commodified, domesticated, neutered. This is the world Alan Moore saw coming. We live in an era where the unspeakable has been spoken so many times that it's become a brand. Lovecraftian horror is no longer fringe, it's mainstream. It's in video games, board games, movies, TV shows, memes. Cthulhu is no longer a symbol of existential dread. He's a mascot for geek culture. The horror has been made safe, and Neonomicon is a savage, unrelenting critique of this exact phenomenon. Moore is arguing that when you strip the horror from horror, when you make the monstrous cute, when you turn cosmic dread into a t-shirt, you are not just trivializing art. You are participating in a cultural defense mechanism. You are defanging the very things that are meant to disturb you, to change you. Because what those things represent, the dissolution of the self, the fragility of meaning, the indifference of the universe, those are truths we cannot bear to confront directly. So we turn them into toys. But the machine doesn't stop there. In Neonomicon, the occult language, aklo, functions as a kind of virus. Once you are exposed to it, it begins to rewrite your perception. It makes you see things differently. It pulls you toward extremes, toward obsession, toward the violation of your own boundaries. Now, think about the internet. Think about the algorithm. The algorithm is not a neutral tool. It is a non-human system of logic, optimizing for a single goal: engagement. And engagement, it turns out, is driven by primal responses: outrage, fear, lust. The algorithm learns very quickly that the most effective way to keep you scrolling is to show you things that provoke a visceral reaction. It pushes you toward the extreme, toward the taboo, toward the unspeakable. It is a language you did not choose to learn, but which is now rewriting the architecture of your mind. This is the aklo of the 21st century. We are drawn, compulsively, to the things that horrify us. Political rage, conspiracy theories, true crime, graphic content. We consume it endlessly, not because it makes us happy, but because it makes us feel something. It scratches an itch we didn't know we had. It gives us access to a world of transgression from the safety of a screen. And every click, every scroll, every moment spent staring at the forbidden is training the algorithm to show us more. This is what Moore means by the eroticism of the unspeakable. It is not just about sex. It is about our culture's morbid, compulsive fascination with the taboo. We are addicted to outrage. We are addicted to offense. We are addicted to the thrill of encountering the thing we are not supposed to see. And capitalism, ever efficient, has learned to monetize it. The unspeakable is no longer hidden in the margins. It is the content. It is the product. It is what drives engagement, what generates clicks, what keeps us coming back. But here's the twist. Here's the final nihilistic revelation lurking in Neonomicon. What happens when the unspeakable is available on demand? What happens when every taboo is just another tab in your browser? What happens when we become so desensitized to horror that nothing can shock us anymore? Does the revelation lose its power? Or is that the revelation? The horror in Neonomicon is not passionate. It is not frenzied. It is cold. The cultists perform their rituals with the bored efficiency of factory workers. The violence is banal. The sexual horror is presented with the emotional effect of a biological textbook. This is the horror of desensitization. When the unspeakable becomes routine, when the monstrous becomes mundane, we are not liberated. We are hollow. We have become the empty vessels the cultists were searching for all along. We have made ourselves ready for the invasion, and we didn't even notice. The revelation has been commodified, packaged, sold back to us as entertainment, and we bought it. So here we are, at the end, and you're probably waiting for me to tell you whether Neonomicon is good or bad, whether it's a justified artistic statement or an indefensible act of provocation. I'm not going to give you that, because that's not the point. Neonomicon is not a comic you are meant to enjoy. It is not a story designed to entertain or comfort or even enlighten in any traditional sense. It is a trap, an intellectual and psychological trap that you walk into willingly and which closes around you page by page. Alan Moore took H.P. Lovecraft's buried anxieties, the fears he coded into atmospheric suggestion and purple prose, and made them brutally, undeniably explicit. He took the subtext and turned it into text, and in doing so, he created a work that argues something deeply uncomfortable. The universe does not speak our language. The rational, sanitized world we inhabit, the world of language, of logic, of laws and social contracts, is a fragile shell. It is a story we tell ourselves to keep the terror at bay. But beneath it, something else is operating. Something older, something that does not care about our concepts of meaning or morality or selfhood, and that something can only be communicated through violation. The comic ends not with resolution, but with birth. Without spoiling the specifics, the final pages show us that the horror is not an event. It is a cycle, a self-perpetuating system. The revelation is not a moment of enlightenment. It is the creation of a new, monstrous reality that will continue to spread, to infect, to transform. The door has been opened, and it will not close. And here's the deeply uncomfortable mirror Moore holds up to us. We, right now, watching this video, discussing this comic, analyzing its themes. We are participating in the exact process the comic describes. We are drawn to the unspeakable. We are compelled to decode it, to understand it, to bring it into the light of rational analysis. From the safety of a screen, we dissect horror. We consume it. We make it comprehensible. And in doing so, are we not also domesticating it? Are we not also turning the monstrous into content? Neonomicon suggests that language and reason are our safe house. They are the walls we build to keep the chaos out. But what if the real truth about the cosmos, about our own primal natures, about the forces that govern existence, doesn't speak our language? What if it operates according to a logic so alien, so fundamentally incompatible with human consciousness, that encountering it is not an experience, but an erasure? And here is the final lingering thought, the one that stays with you long after you close the book. What if a part of us wants that? What if the safe, rational, sanitized world we've built is so stifling, so disconnected from anything real, that we are subconsciously drawn to the very things that will destroy us, just to feel something true? What if the eroticism of the unspeakable is not a flaw in human nature, but its deepest, most honest expression? What if the revelation is not something we need to seek? What if it's something we've been inviting in all along?